The cheapest graphics card anyone can buy, which is also new. It's an interesting idea and we've already looked at the Nvidia option. But now I've done it and gone and bought the AMD option. This right here is the AMD Radeon HD6350, which is, for anyone that hadn't guessed, just a rebrand of the AMD Radeon HD5450, a much more well-known card, because a lot of people actually had them. And it's a card that we've actually previously looked at on the channel, although that was only in Crossfire, so don't worry, this is technically new territory for the channel with the benchmarks you'll be seeing. Based on the CDAR Pro variant of the Terascale architecture, it was originally sold for around £20 or $25 back 8 years ago in 2011, coming clocked in at 650MHz on most variants with 512MB of GDDR4 VRAM. It's not exactly spectacular in terms of power, even with its whole 80 shading units, which isn't very many. Although it does have this going in its favour, it was a very cheap card when it came out, and it was alright with the price that it costed, and it also hardly ever touches 15 watts. In fact, under overclocked settings, it will only touch 15 to 20 watts under full load, with the stock limitations in place. Not that it really makes much difference. And for the low price of £3 or $5 today in most regions, you're going to be finding the OEM variants of the card, which become bang smack in the middle of AMD specifications with what I've just said. And I know what people are going to be saying, but budget builds, if it's OEM and a rebrand, it must be really well binned, and it's got a fan to boot, so how well does it overclock? Well, I did try this off screen, but it doesn't really go all too far without some modifications, so we'll definitely have to save that for another video. In synthetic tests though, it's apparently twice as fast as the Nvidia option we bought not so long ago, but we'll have to put that to the test very soon. Now, I found this graphics card when browsing eBay for the cheapest graphics cards under the lowest to highest section with Buy It Now turned on, as this is where I came across it, making it the cheapest AMD graphics card out there that you can buy in new or refurbished condition, borderline new. Anyway, the likely reason for this is because most of them were used in schools, servers and everything, and a lot of people had spares, and a lot of them didn't really see much use. And they were alright back in the day because of that strange connector on the back, which is a DMS59 port, which can be converted to a whole host of solutions, multi-monitors, everything like this. But in the modern day, we're talking 2019, it's easier to actually just get a DisplayPort based solution set up with a modern graphics card that has modern drivers and actually works on newer systems. But overall, moving away from this though, the card is only tiny. It has a very small GPU die there, but that's all it really needs to perform its most basic tasks. We'll also be removing the backplate from it, as it is currently a low profile one, but it's only really one screw holding it in place, so if you want to stick this in a full size system like I am, well, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. I'm testing it on a Ryzen 5 system so that we can see the full performance of this beast, and to be fair to the card, it does actually support all the way up to DirectX 11, so we're going to be testing some pretty modern titles. Now up first is the likes of CSGO, which is usually where I end up starting my benchmarks nowadays because it's a very popular game and could famously run on a potato 7 years ago when it came out. Anywho, with the modern state of the game, it doesn't run on potatoes anymore, so with the lowest settings, I was kind of surprised that it ran as well as it did. I wouldn't exactly recommend targeting any HD resolutions, mind you, as the game seemed to suffer majorly when I tried this, even in the menus, and it was kind of competitive in these lower resolutions, provided you don't mind stretching the image as apparently some people do. Honestly though, reactions felt slightly slow, but the game was definitely playable, even if it wasn't optimal. Next up, to stop me from burning my eyes out from the beauty that was CSGO, we have the HD resolution. That's right, 720p in The Sims 4, which once again actually ran quite nicely and looked alright too, because it's a beauty optimized game. We're using that low and medium preset they have available, as they've got lots of nice optimized presets to select from, and it looked alright. It was definitely smooth enough. Any higher resolutions or settings would of course plummet the frame rate, but for targeting a HD resolution with okay settings, the card was off to an alright start. Throwing us back into a world of darkness, we have the likes of GTA 5, which ran pretty awfully and even crashed when we used the game's normal lower settings. However, this is the beauty of budget builds, because we got the game to run in 240p with no shadows. It looked absolutely awful, but it did run alright, and credit where credit is due, the game was definitely now playable and didn't crash. Honestly though, I would definitely call this a rather playable experience, as you can actually see what you're doing. Admittedly, it does look a bit like a PS2 title, which a lot of people thought it was. Most people I showed this to thought it was San Andreas. Overall though, not too bad, and the game did run. on something that was mostly used to show teachers their emails. Next on our list, with the HD resolution, is the likes of Minecraft, because who doesn't love a bit of Minecraft? So with a fairly new version running with Optifine, we actually saw that the title worked perfectly fine, although I will add the game didn't feel 100% smooth as it said it was running. Overall though, it was still alright. But keep in mind that I have definitely had better experiences. In fact, I'd be willing to say that this ran nicer on the Nvidia equivalent. Oh, and the game did run awfully if you tried anything like upping the settings or using shaders. New indie titles like this one, which I actually picked up for 79p and invested far too much time into, but we won't touch on that now, with Rainfall, which worked alright when you lowered the resolution and lowered the settings down. Now, most of these games aren't exactly graphically advanced, so it doesn't matter if you lower the settings a little bit, and the resolution, well, it's an RTS game, it's not going to matter if the resolution's a little bit low. I was playing in 640x480 for these types of games years ago, and it was definitely playable, but I would add that speeding up the game, well, it could affect the FPS slightly, but not as much as I was expecting, and definitely not as much as it did on the Nvidia equivalent cards. Although a lot of these titles aren't too intensive and do work on iGPUs nowadays, if you've got an older system that you wanted to play some simpler titles like this on, you know, it was alright. I also have to mention that the game has sort of a first-person view where you can control your own men and fight like that, and that would cause the frame rate to suffer ever so slightly, but once again, not as much as I would have thought. Simpler 2D titles will end up working alright, with Terraria running in the 1050p resolution because for some reason I ended up benchmarking with my old side monitor. So that's exactly what we're going to see, because it turned out to be a perfect match because with the low to medium settings I had no issues playing it. Then again, if you wanted to target a full 60 plus FPS, you could turn the resolution down a tad further. Once again, moving away from the world of simple titles to something more AAA, we have Battlefield 3 once again running in the 360p resolution, because I said I would see just how well it runs these titles. And unless you want to target a similar resolution to the Nintendo 64, well, there's not really much else you can do to play this title. Then again, if you do target this resolution, it'll run alright, as seen here. Now, for those of you out there that would rather find out how well older titles would run, well, the likes of Quake III ran perfectly, so for those early 2000s titles you can target those high resolutions and those high settings for some very nice frame rates. In fact, the frame rates were so high, is there any point even looking at the average? AAA open world games like Skyrim will only really work with a very low resolution with very low settings used, so ultimately it doesn't look very good. But it runs alright most of the time. However, there was a bit of an issue if you increase the resolution at all. We're talking it'd be worse than the PS3. So as long as you don't mind sticking to what is a standard definition resolution with awful quality settings, it will run. And because you guys like to see me test modern games, we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which would give us a big black screen, and then would show momentary hitches of gameplay. Now, I wasn't able to capture these with MSI Afterburner, but you can see the 5 FPS it was running at during these black screens, which wasn't all too exciting, but it shows just how well modern games will run on this. Once again though, emulation is something I tested, and hey, for a card that's actually somewhat modern, it can run the null versions of Dolphin, with all your simple titles working fine and all previous consoles, well, they worked fine as well, although some of the more advanced ones will be a tad slow in places. Whether or not you class Twilight Princess as an emulation task that can be quite intensive is up to you, but either way, any further than this in terms of games you want to run, well, if you don't enable frame skipping, you'll be playing in slow motion. But, at the end of the day, how well does it compare to the competition? Well, aside from the fact that this card was able to run modern games thanks to DirectX 11, unlike the NVS 300, which was the cheapest Nvidia card we could buy, and I'll leave a link down below if you want to find out how well that performed, well, overall, this card was better in CloudGate as a benchmark, and was infinitely better in Firestrike, because the Nvidia card can't actually start it. Still, I do have to say that these Terascale drivers on the card, well, they were mediocre. In fact, they weren't very good at all. You know, they worked, but they didn't work very well, and they were nowhere near as good as the NVS drivers that Nvidia has out were. When it came to actually using the cards, both of them were alright, and there wasn't really much of a difference to them when it came to normal tasks. Both of them can surf the web, both of them can watch videos, both of them can run OBS, stream, everything along those lines. I'd say the NVS is quieter, but that's because it doesn't have a fan. And I'd say the HD6350 can run games better, but that's just because it can run newer games. In terms of power, you know, they were each better in different titles. Neither of them were bad, but, you know, I'd probably buy the HD6350, but we'll discuss that later on. So in conclusion, the cheapest AMD graphics card you can buy. And is it worth its £3 buying price? Well, it's a display adapter more than a graphics card, and if it comes down to that, well, I'm tempted to say the Nvidia card was just a better display adapter, because it has more modern drivers, and they were easier to get hold of, you know, not that the AMD one's hard to get to, but the Nvidia one's even cheaper. In fact, Windows will try and download some drivers for this Terascale card, but, you know, they're not very good, so you do have to go out and seek out your own AMD drivers, whereas the Quadro drivers that were pre-installed, well, they are about as good as the ones from the Nvidia website. Now, I don't recommend buying either of these ones really if you're out there to build a gaming PC, but if you're on a strictly gaming experience, I'd probably say go for the HD option. And I'd buy it over the Nvidia option because honestly, if you're spending £3 and just want to do some desperate type of gaming in the low-end regions, well, I'd say it's alright, and we've seen the performance is just about passable. However, I would say that if you wanted to actually get some gaming done, well, provided you can power it, just get a used graphics card, because even then, you know, a graphics card we found in the bin did a better job than some of these cards do. But anyways, I hope this has been helpful to those of you who want a card. I'll try and stick some links down in the description for these cards, if you're interested in buying one that is, and good night. So this video was definitely highly requested after the Nvidia one, so I hope you enjoyed the extra performance of this card. A huge thanks to the supporters of the channel and the patrons who massively help out by allowing me to buy these cards, even though they are cheap, it all helps. So thank you very much, and you can always like and subscribe for more.